What's the difference between a decent and a good player to you? That is a very good question. It's an easy question, but it's also a difficult question. Yeah, I mean, you can simplify it by saying, hey, a good player has above a 50% win rate, but that's definitely not true. I've seen many good players that have a sub 50%, and maybe it's just because they have 20, 30,000 games. I would say the difference between a good player and a average player, or a decent and good player, map awareness, and then just what I would call game sense. I always tried to break down my games into three phases. Phase one being like what I call initiation, where you're going to try to get your free damage, your free spotting. The goal in phase one is to not take any damage at all. And then it's just to try to get bonus damage. In most games, it's going to be the first 1 to 2 minutes of the game where people are trying to set up, and the game is super dynamic where there's just a lot of opportunity to be had, right? Phase one. Phase two is what I like to call like the stalemate, right? Where everyone's in position, everyone's at their chokes, and nothing is really happening. And that's where not a lot really happens. That's super exciting, and this is where the difference between again a good player and a bad player is how you play that second phase. Yes, you can get some great early damage, but if you don't have any impact later in the game, phase one, and then phase three, which is the end of the game where there's a dynamic tilt. And after the tilt happens, one side will start winning a flank, and then at that point, usually the game ends. That's like cleanup, right? So cleanup usually don't have much of an impact. Phase one, initiation, you have some impact if you're a light tank and you get like a million spots and you kill their arty. But that middle phase, I find, is what dictates a good player. And that has to do with how are you able to abuse your tank's strengths and cover the weaknesses by taking good locations and then knowing when that tilt happens. So from my experience after playing like a million games in this in this game, recognizing when the tilt happens and using it to your advantage. That's the best way I can simplify it, even though I know it's a long answer. Because you'll find that in every game there is a very important moment in the game where it shifts and all of a sudden you're winning or you're losing. And recognizing when that happens, so whether you're on the losing flank and you can fall back, or if you're on the stalemate flank and fall back to help your team, recognizing that and covering the weakness. So it is kind of map awareness, but I would say in any game there's always a tilt moment, and sometimes the phase one and phase two and phase three melt into one because you steamroll. But I just find that recognizing that moment of dynamic shift and jumping and making sure that you react to it, because most people you'll find that are like, well, that flank can deal with it, my responsibility is to just sit here for 10 minutes and do nothing and hold this flank because I'm a heavy tank. Not necessarily true. If you have the potential to fall back, or if you notice that you're losing the other flank, you're going to lose the game, so you might as well push, communicate with your team and be like, we have to take this flank and gain that map control, or we're going to lose. And so noticing when to fall back, when to push, depending on how the gameplay works, is that's the difference between a good player and a bad player, or a decent player and a great player. And you'll find that the people that really suck at the game, the people that have like 46% win rate with 30,000 games and they still are raging and blaming the team constantly, I find that those players do not respond at all. They're the ones that YOLO in the very beginning and die and blame the team for not shooting anything. They're the ones that push really aggressively or sit in the back end camp, and they don't recognize that the game is constantly moving and shifting and it's being dynamic. And so I might make a YouTube video explaining that a little bit, because I find that I do this subconsciously where I'm always thinking, okay, I got my early spots, now I need to shift gears. And as a light tank player, phase one is obviously the most important, coming close to phase two or phase three, where you're going to be farming and cleaning up a lot of. So in phase one as a light tank player, right, you're going to be getting those early spots. You can usually get 500 to 1,000 assists pretty easily as a light tank player in most maps. Phase three, if your guys are winning, you can be ahead of your team in spotting all the arty and the tank destroyers. If you're losing, like I just did in the last game, you can fall back and at least collect intel as tanks push you. And then phase two is where light tank players struggle the most, where it's a stalemate and you feel like you need to be doing something, but there's nothing to do because everything is in chokes and you're like, I don't really know if I can have an impact. That's okay. That's when most light tank players go and die because they get impatient. And just recognize that during that time, you're just trying to get a little bonus damage, maybe a little bit of bonus assistance, but realistically, during that middle part of the game, light tank players don't really need to do much and really can't do much. Maybe play guard dog when something YOLOs your arty or something like that, but realistically, staying alive is your main goal for that phase. So yeah, anyway, guys, hopefully that makes sense. I know I just went on a huge spiel there, but if you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer those for you.